Welcome back to Lessons from the Front and to beautiful Thailand. I'm here on the island of Phuket. Imagine if you could have the beauty of this paradise island and a war game. Well, that's all now possible here in Phuket, thanks to Bill. Let's go over and meet Bill and to see what he's been up to here in Thailand.
Hi, I'm Bill from Wargame's Holiday Centre Phuket, and today I've invited my friend Eugene, who hosts the YouTube channel Lessons from the Front, to participate in a historical recreation of one of the most famous battles of all time, the Battle of Agincourt. Let's see how it turns out.
In October 1415, an exhausted English army, perhaps 6,000 to 7,000 men, stood on a narrow strip of farmland near the village of Azincourt in northern France. They were weakened by disease after the siege of Harfleur. Supplies were low, enemy territory surrounded them. At their head stood a young Henry V, who had invaded France barely 2.5 months earlier to revive English claims to the French throne, reassert sovereignty over disputed lands, and unite his own troubled kingdom through foreign conquest. Blocking their path to Calais was a far larger French army, heavily armoured nobles confident that the numbers and honour would bring swift victory. The table Bill created for today's game, orientated short edge to short edge on a 4x6 foot battlefield, represents the traditional account, a narrow field hemmed in by woodland. Recent autumn rains had turned the ground into deep, clinging mud. According to the popular narrative, the English advanced their archers in wedge formation and anchored their line behind sharpened stakes driven into the earth. When the French moved forward, they were funneled into tightening bottleneck under a storm of longbow fire, both from the front and from the archers positioned on the flanks. Formations compressed, men stumbled, armour became a burden, numbers quickly became a liability. This version of events represents the Battle of Agincourt as a triumph of terrain, discipline, and tactical clarity over arrogance and overconfidence. History records a crushing English victory against the odds. But today I was determined to try to reverse that outcome, and so I chose to take on the role of the French commander, Charles d'Aubray, Constable of France. Due to the narrow frontage and the English archers positioned aggressively on both flanks, I made an early decision. Rather than drive everything straight into the bottleneck as happened historically, I swung my 2 cavalry commands outward to deal with the archers on either flank. At the same time, I ordered the men-at-arms through the centre gap left by the knights to assault the main English line, with my crossbowmen following to provide support. On paper, it was a coordinated assault: clear the flanks, fix the centre, then use the weight of numbers to break through. In reality, the cavalry charge was a tall order from the start.
Archers!
Archers! Archers! Draw!
Charging longbowmen positioned behind stakes across difficult sodden ground proved disastrous. Both mounted assaults were easily repulsed, the nobles withdrawing to the rear to regroup. Their advance did open the battlefield for the men-at-arms, but it turned the muddy fields into even deeper mud. That churned ground had consequences. My infantry began to advance at uneven speeds, their movement entirely dependent on dice and terrain. The cohesion I had hoped for simply wasn't there. And yet, while the mounted nobles were recovering from their embarrassing repulse, the men-at-arms performed far better. They dealt effectively with the longbow units threatening their flanks and pushed through to the centre.
It's going to be 3 + 8, 9.
So he's retiring.
Yeah, retiring facing the enemy.
Right.
Because I class them as regular because they're professional soldiers.
Right. Professional longbowmen.
Yeah. And because you struck them, you get to follow up. And because they're broken past them, they're going to give them a disorder as well.
Despite taking casualties all the way up the muddy slope, their sheer weight of numbers began to tell once they reached the English line. The melee was vicious. As happened historically at the Battle of Agincourt, the Duke of York fell, and Henry V's brother, Humphrey, was wounded in the fighting. For a moment, the struggle hung in the balance. But unlike the historical outcome, the French did not collapse. Gradually, methodically, pursuing the English, pushing them back and back, the numerically superior men-at-arms began to bulldoze their way forward.
Commander puts you up one all the time. So you get to follow up.
How many dice?
Just one. There's D6 plus. So 8. Oh, you keep following them up every time. They can't get away from you.
Go into their boys.
The King and Sir George!
The English line bent, then gave way.
This is going to put a pin onto these guys, and you get to follow up. I'll put a cross on these guys because they've suffered a...
Okay, so they're going to follow up 1 inch. 1 plus 6, is it?
Yeah,
So 7 inches.
7 inches, which will bring them into contact with them, and large steamrolling into them.
The returning mounted nobles, having regrouped, now pursued the fleeing archers on both flanks. What had begun as a potential repetition of history slowly turned into its reversal. It was only as daylight began to fade that Henry was able to disengage and withdraw, preserving what remained of his army. Considering the sheer weight of numbers engaged in this commonly accepted version of the battle, it is perhaps no surprise that many have described the English victory at Agincourt as a miracle. On this table, when the numbers were allowed to press home and momentum was sustained, the miracle did not occur.
So now I'm kind of wondering, how did Henry win? Is there something we're missing? Maybe our interpretation by modern standards of a medieval battlefield is wrong. Maybe hindsight has been our worst enemy, and logic and clear evidence has been there all the time. But let's take another look at the Battle of Agincourt, and hopefully this time the English will win.
Okay folks, if you enjoyed this episode of Lessons from the Front, Agincourt, there will be a part B and C. In part B, Bill and I will sit down and examine a different perspective on the battle, looking more closely at the evidence, the sources, the weapons, and the assumptions behind the accepted narrative. In part C, Bill and I will return to the tabletop, this time applying Bill's interpretations, to see whether the English victory can be recreated under those conditions. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that context matters. My thanks then to Bill and the team here at the Wargaming Holiday Center. Whether your interest is in ancient medieval warfare, the 7 Years' War, the American Civil War, or the World Wars, there's an impressive range of periods and beautifully prepared tables to enjoy, with over 20,000 figures available for visitors to use. Many of the games can be played using a flexible generic rule system, pictured here, the same one I used for both our Agincourt game and a French and Indian War battle that I had, and both were tremendous fun. If you'd like to combine serious wargaming or fun wargaming with a tropical island getaway, you can contact Bill via the email displayed now on the screen. And if you've enjoyed this episode of Lessons from the Front, please consider subscribing and look out for parts B and C, where we may discover that Agincourt is not quite as simple as legend suggests. So until next time, happy gaming!